Hello and welcome to today's painting demonstration. I'm going to be doing a misty mountain scene today, and I don't know whether it's a sunrise or a sunset. I guess it depends on what mountains you are going to be painting for yourself and what vibe you want to have. But I do a lot of screen capturing when I'm watching reels, and so I did a little screen capture, and what I'm looking at is available for you to look at up close, and that's going to be in my art Discord community server, and the link for that is in the description of the video. So this is what we're looking at for our reference. It's soft, it's warm, and it's got a lot of transitioning colors throughout the whole thing. Now what this is lacking is a clear focal point. So your interest is drawn to the small trees at the bottom, so I went ahead and brought them forward, and we're going to do some more interesting tree shapes that also vary in shape and form a little bit more. So the one I have picked out is at 1/3 and 1/3, and it's going to have the brightest light behind it, and it's going to be our darkest contrast. Our most intense contrast point, and I'll make some of the branches a little bit irregular and funky on that one too. That's going to draw your interest even more, and then we're just going to focus on subtle blending on this one. So I'm starting out with my standard palette, and I have my large oval wash brush, and I'm going to do the underpainting with the burnt sienna. Starting with those dark values. In this case, it's just going to be the foreground and maybe the side of the mountain that's going off screen there. Off screen, off scene. I'm not going to come too far up those foreground trees because I don't want to be here all day doing that. You know, I did notice at the new art store that we have in town that there is such a thing as a transparent burnt sienna, and I thought that was interesting. Like, what's the difference between burnt sienna with a touch of water in it and transparent burnt sienna? I'm curious, that it did pique my interest. So I'm going to be making a video very soon about what I am doing about the quinacridone nickel azo gold replacement. And so far I've been, you know, pretty happy with just using burnt sienna as an underpainting, but it doesn't have, it's just the pigment is not as magical. If you know, you know. And they did discontinue that pigment, which makes so many people very sad. So now I'm just adding water to this as I'm coming up to the next lightest value. On this mid-range in value and also mid-range in structure. The middle mountain range. Sure, a better comedian would have made a joke out of that, but I kind of floundered. Okay, now the side coming off the paper on the mountain is going to be a little bit darker. It is further away from the sun, and then it's going to come up to being lighter. Now I'm taking most of the paint off my brush for this lightest area. I'm just blending that up. I'm gonna leave some clouds around those mountaintops, the dark mountaintops, and I'm gonna leave the right corner of the sky just a little bit darker. It's interesting, we have like this yin-yang composition happening. I feel like it works. I feel like it's going to be okay. I'm going to deepen the value in this corner over here. And then bring that up a bit to the mid-range. That's more like what I want right there. Now to make our highlights glow, I'm just gonna touch the cad yellow with the side of my filbert brush, and over the lightest areas I'm gonna put some yellow and just wash that over. Okay, that's it for our underpainting. I'm going to put the filbert aside. We are done with that pretty solidly. Now I'm going to mix some colors. There isn't much blue in this at all. There's some earthy greens using ultramarine, and like there's lots of olive, and then working up to warm tones and some really, really warm apricot. So that's what I'm going to mix right now. I'm going to do a nice gradient. There is a little bit of cool in this background mountain. Subtle though. I'm going to start up here with the titanium white, and I'm adding just a touch of cerulean blue. That's going to be in the sky away from the sun. Then we need to make a kind of a gray color. A light blue gray. So I'm starting with cerulean blue. I'm going to grab some white. Grab some burnt sienna. That's going to give us a really earthy green color if I added enough. Add a bit more. Okay, that's like a taupe. Adding a touch more blue on the side, because I'm looking for a cool gray. And then I'm going to add a little bit of white to see what we got over here. And that's about what we need right there. I'm going to keep that taupe because I like that color, and I feel like we're just going to branch right off the side of that. Adding a little bit of cadmium yellow light. and red. Okay, then we're going to need to go down into a darker value. Ultramarine blue. And then the burnt sienna. That's going to be the absolute darkest value in our scene. And I might need to add a little bit more burnt sienna to get that more on the green side of things and less on the dark blue side of things. That is pretty much perfect. That's going to give us a nice shadowed, warm glow. This is the kind of color that you see in sunsets in the mountains. The deep pine trees that go deep green and then gold, orange gold during the sunset. I was just in the mountains last weekend and saw something, photographed something very, very similar with that color in mind. Okay, so those are our really warm greens. I know they don't look green right there, but that's going to be what we need. I'm going to start in the background with that lightest blue. In the upper left, I'm gonna cut into the top of the mountain that I have, pretty well defined, and make sure that my brush strokes are pretty well blended. I'm using the flat brush instead of the filbert, which I usually use for skies, and I can't tell you why. There's no reason for that. I might switch. Just got so excited. Almost hear people hollering at me. Why the flat now? No, you're right. You're right. Start with the filbert because you're not going to have to blend away all those sharp edges. The edges with the filbert are going to be much softer and less defined. So when doing your initial sky work, it just makes sense. Adding another layer over to the upper left. And I'm going to take this color and I'm just going to go above the top, on the top edge. Kind of disappearing up into that top right corner. As I come down, I'm going to grab more white. And blend back into the light blue color that I put down. And towards the horizon line. There's still a little bit of blue on this brush. You can see it contrasting with the peach. Well, it's ending up as peach with all of this light white over it. Now I'm going to take just straight titanium white and go to that yellow cloud shape I left. Right on that horizon line. And I'm just going to loosely blend it up into the sky, but I'm going to keep it as a defined cloud. Just a soft one. A little bit more white, but I'm not going to touch it all the way to the mountain because I like how that light yellow is showing through and warming up that cloud. The paint is drying very quickly today. It is warmer than average for this time of year. You'll notice that the different weather, humidity and temperature in particular, is going to affect how quickly everything dries. Before this wet palette, before I started using it, I didn't even like painting at all when it was warm outside, or inside rather, more importantly. Practically had to paint next to a humidifier. All right, I'm taking note of the texture in the sky. Blending, blending, blending. I'm adding some light wispies. Okay, so instead of continuing to layer down in this area, I want to paint this mountain and then blend it with the sky right there, because that line's going to pretty much disappear into this valley. So, the taupe color and the gray. Okay, I have about that much of the mountain without gradating the color. Now I'm going to lighten it up with some titanium white. And then continue down a little bit, and then I'm going to need to blend back into what I have put down. Filbert brush is helping out a bunch with this. It is, if it's as warm as it is here in your home, then you're going to want to do this part kind of quickly. And lots of patting motions. That'll give us the impression that this mist is billowing up. Now I'm going to be coming to the lightest. It needs to be the lightest area, so I'm just going to go to straight white. And I am going to blend into the sky and into the mountain using those same pouncy type brush strokes. Also going to be dragging this down over our tree line, making sure to get in between those trees, the foreground trees. That's looking like a pretty good gradient, and we're using transparency to our advantage right now. So a lot of that warm color is in the underpainting, and that's coming through in different areas, giving us subtle transitions, but we've painted over the top of all of that. It's just that we're not covering it with paint on the next layers. So now I'm going to start from the dark side of the painting over on the left, and I'm going to pick up that taupe, the taupe. And I'm going to go heavy on the taupe in the corner. I feel like that is just the exact right color for that spot. But for the tops of the trees, I'm going to need a different brush, and I'm deciding whether we should blend. I feel like we should blend towards that light color with the filbert brush so that all the brush strokes are very cohesive. And then for the detailed, well, more detailed treetops, I'm going to switch to a point brush for those. So let's do that blending first. picked up just a little bit of that gray. And I'm mixing that gray into the taupe. I'm going to start to do some kind of subtle tree shapes in this next layer of paint. Just some vertical scribbly shapes. Gonna mix in a little bit of our darkest value in the corner using the same vertical tree type gestural brushstrokes. In preparation, there's going to be a lot more of it coming up into the right corner. So as I'm letting this all dry, I'm going to pick up, I think, a number 2 point brush. And these top trees are going to be a little bit warmer. They're catching a little bit more diffused sun. So this gold color that we mixed, right next to our taupe, I'm going to go back and forth from those colors. So these trees are going to be kind of out there in the distance. So I am going to be just putting some vague vertical shapes in it and trying to make sure they don't replicate too much. I'm adding a little bit of white to my gold as I go towards the sun side. And then it's going to disappear about there. Now I can focus on the blending I need to do to make that work. But now that the trees are coming closer to us, you can use more tree-like brush strokes in order to blend these colors. That'll actually give you a little bit more I don't know what to say. You don't have to make it so smooth. When you're dealing with brushstrokes that are kind of like more like trees or foliage, you get more permission to be a little bit more chaotic and choppy with your blend. Those are the words I'm trying to say. So hopefully you can kind of see everything that you've blended so far and all the paint that you have mixed so far, and you can kind of just pick up things and blend around. That's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping for you. I'm gonna blend these guys. Using those vertical point brush strokes. Now I'm going back to the gold, but I'm gonna add a little bit more white. And see, I'm gonna go back and forth, just adding these little mid-ground tree shapes, kind of incorporating that color. And I grabbed some white, and now I'm gonna go back into the mountain, blending back. So I did want to have some really bright color behind our foreground tree. Okay, good. That about does that. Now I'm gonna take some white, go along the top, soften up that edge, bring some of them down. Okay, great. Picking up more of that gold, and I'm going to go along the top of that ridge line. But I'm going to progressively pick up more and more taupe as I go back towards the away side of the painting. And now those brush strokes are going to come down. Getting progressively darker and cooler. Much, much cooler. The blending is a little bit chunky here and there, but I kind of like it. I kind of like it because it gives me the impression that there's a lot of different kinds of trees happening up in there. Up in there and up in there. I'm even gonna add maybe some groups of chunky shapes coming back away from the sun. Just showing some texture in the forest. Okay. That's great, that's that middle ground. Now for the foreground. So the top trees are a little bit lighter and warmer than the rest of it. I think it'd be easier if we started with our darkest value in the corner and then move up. And we'll just do some back and forth blending like we did with the mid-ground trees. I'm gonna need to use mostly vertical brush strokes here. And I'm putting it on pretty thick, but I am gonna need that to dry. So now that I'm approaching the other area, the mid-range, where the mid-range blends with the foreground, I'm gonna need to pick up more of that taupe color. Blend doesn't have to be super smooth because trees. Okay. Now I'm picking up that point brush again. There is a warm version of that darkest dark. And I'm picking that up. And blending with vertical brush strokes into our foreground range. But I want the warm color to be on the top. So if you feel like your paint is picking up instead of getting put down, then leave that area and return after it's dried. And this happens to me almost every painting, which is why I make sure to remind you guys, because it will happen to you. And don't fight it. Don't fight it. It's almost never worth it. Okay, the warm dark is gonna start doing some detailed tree action. Gonna do all sorts of different tree shapes, bushy trees, pointy trees, if I remember, and I try to remember to add some end-of-life trees, because that happens in every forest. There's always some snags. What a ugly slang term for a dead tree. If you want to do that, I would recommend doing it with your script or your liner. Unless you're really that amazing with your technique. I mean, you go. You do you. I am dragging the paint around in a way where some of it is more opaque. Making it darker than other areas where I'm just dragging it along. Also, make sure that your trees aren't exactly the same space away from each other every single interval. It is so tempting to do that. I don't know if that's like psychological or what. Oh, here we go. There's a little snag. And I did it with the round brush. We're just going to leave that just like that. Happy accident. Calling that now. Okay, this tree is next to our focal point tree. And believe me, I see all of this kind of yucky transparency, but I will fix it. But all that stuff has to dry. And this is our focal point tree because I'm kind of keeping track of it with our third marks right there. And I do that mostly for you guys. But the more it's there, the more I use it also, so. This tree is standing a little bit taller. The paint on top is a little bit thicker, making it darker. We're still using the warm dark, not the cool dark. The cool dark is going to be reserved for that bottom. I think I'm pretty happy with that tree shape just as it is. I'm gonna leave it. Coming along to the edge here, I think I want to add another snag. Another tree bone. Tree spine. I guess there's some arms hanging off of it. Or fingers. Okay, it's going too far. There. I've been told by a couple different painters you don't want to have a tree split 50-50 on the edge of your painting. You either want to go 60% or more in or 60% or more out, but you don't want it to be split just halfway. Apparently it's very unsatisfying for the eye. It makes sense. Some things don't have to be scientific. Okay. There's the liner. I'm gonna get a good amount of water in here so that the bristles are nice and easy to control. I'm gonna shape my brush in my palette to a nice, sharp chisel. And then I'm going to drag up from the bottom, and that's going to give us just the daintiest line, like micron thin. And some little tiny branches coming off of that guy. I'll make the base of that trunk a little bit thicker. Okay, good. I think that's the last one of those that I feel like I need to add. Now, the warm color, I'm going to grab some of our darkest dark, mix it halfway between, and then come down, and I'm going to blend the bottom of those foreground trees with the neighboring abyss. Using vertical paintbrush strokes, a bigger version of what we've been using throughout the entire process. I'm going to add a little bit of water to my brush. Don't want to get too bristly. Okay, I'm going to need that to dry in there because that's going to need another layer. I'm picking up my flat brush for the first official time. Our darkest dark, which is the ultramarine blue and the sienna. I'm going to come up from the bottom with some vertical vague tree shapes that are just a little bit bigger than everything else that's on there. Just don't want any crazy details leading your eye off the bottom of the painting. I want it to wander around in the middle for a little while. I'm checking out our sky blend, and that's all dry. I feel like maybe it could be wider and brighter, or I could just leave it exactly how it is. Honestly, nothing about it bothers me. There's some beautiful apricot and warm tones showing through in different places, but there's no distracting blending. It's all very smooth. It gets warmer as it hits the mountain. The warmth can be seen pretty consistently all the way up the mountain, so actually I'm just gonna leave it alone. It's a good thing. Okay, I feel like this area is dry enough to address it. But just to be careful, I'm gonna lay the paint on very carefully. Need to mix a little bit more of that warm dark, just adding a little bit more burnt sienna to the ultramarine. Alright, I picked up a little bit of taupe and some water just to blend this bottom area just a little bit more. But I think I like what I see. And you know, this chunky blending technique, I feel like this is pretty beginner friendly. So I'm going to label this tutorial as beginner friendly. I feel like once you get the sketchy brush technique and the pouncy brush technique down, that this would be really easy for you to just have to wait for everything to dry, which is much easier than going fast with the blending, even though there's some parts where you might want to move a little bit quicker. But once again, it depends on your interior, the interior temperature of your house. So if you're blasting that furnace, your paint's going to be different. That's going to be something you'll just have to get used to. But thank you so much for joining me on this little journey. This came out like way better than I thought. Like, I knew there was something with this one, but it really is quite magical, and it has to do with all these subtle gradients that you can see, and that just has to do with the layering of the paint. So a lot of that magic happens with just the transparency of acrylic. So thank you so much for joining me again, and I hope you enjoyed this painting process video, and until next time, happy painting.